Hey there, if you enjoy my work, please take a moment to like the video. I need your help if I'm going to resurrect this channel. Hey there my friends, couple of things real quick before we get into the story today. Number one, I have to send an extremely heartfelt thank you to my dear friend, the multi-talented purveyor of the bluest of roses, the seraph of stories herself, Stephanie Swan Quills, for lending her luxurious voice in a very special role for tonight's story. Please do yourself a favor and check out her amazing content, if you haven't already, and let her know that I sent you. Also, I recently started a Discord server, which I will link in the description down below. Come on over there and join the conversation. I'll be actually setting up live chat sessions with me, one-on-one, with certain people in the near future. So go ahead and check that out and let me know what you think. There's a lot going on over there in my Discord, and now's your chance to get in on the ground level. Alright, so on to the story. Hope you enjoy. Have you ever been stalked by someone in your dreams? What if every time you saw them, things escalated toward a certain climax? Listen to this story and tell me what you would do if faced with such a strange series of encounters. It gets pretty wild at the end. Trust me. Hello, Mr. X. My name is Peter. I'm a 25-year-old male living in Mexico and discovered your channel pretty recently. I decided to contact you after hearing a story you read a while back about a young woman being tormented by some sort of nightmare creature called an incubus. There's an issue I've been trying to deal with for years now, and the story you told about Venus, it was the first time I heard anyone experiencing something like what I'm going through. Now, full disclosure, I do have a medical condition that will become relevant in the story, to some extent, that I'm about to tell you. I have very bad eyesight. My eye doctor says I only have about 45% of normal vision functionality. Unfortunately, it can't be fixed with surgery at this stage of my life. The first part of the story took place sometime in 2012, back when I was around age 16. I was on dialysis because of a kidney transplant. I have to admit, I'm actually tearing up a little bit just typing about this. It was a very stressful and painful time in my life. I had finally managed to fall asleep, something that's pretty difficult to do with all the loud beeping and buzzing of medical machinery around. Just as I crossed over into dreamland, I startled awake again. To my surprise, I was no longer hooked up to the machines. Instead, I was on my feet, running through a gorgeous, vibrant green forest. I could hear birds chirping joyfully in the distance. The experience was extremely pleasant and freeing. I had been suffering from depression because of the circumstances surrounding my kidney surgery. When you're dealing with that, your activity is basically limited to slowly shuffling around the house. It was hard to deal with because I was previously an extremely active and outdoorsy kind of boy. In this beautiful dream, I was free again, striding through the woods without a care in the world. I leapt over creeks and jumped down small cliffs, sprinted up hills and slid down embankments. I remember wearing a shirt with a picture of Sonic the Hedgehog. Not very subtle with the symbolism there, I guess. After a while, I began to feel thirsty in the dream. I saw a lake nearby, so I decided to run over and take a drink. When I arrived at the shore, I saw that the water was the cleanest I'd ever seen. It was almost too clean, giving off an otherworldly glimmer. The only way I could describe it is heavenly. I knelt down to dip my hands into the water when a streak of color caught my eye. I looked up toward the middle of the lake. It was at that point that I took notice of my eyesight. I could see just as clearly as any other person could, unlike what I'm able to see in real life, the blurry mess that I'm used to. In the middle of the lake, standing waist high in the water, was a girl who looked to be around my age. She was far away, so I could barely make out any of her features. I started walking into the lake, wanting to reach her. She stood with her back facing me. I could see she had pale skin, not sickly pale, but pale enough for me to notice. Her hair was such a deep, rich shade of red that it seemed to give off a gentle glow under the sun's rays. As I stared at her, I realized the lake itself was surrounded by a ring of tall trees. The entire scene felt like some kind of presentation, as if it was all a show put on just for me. It was like something out of a movie. As I got closer, I came within a few steps away, and I asked her, "Who are you?" She turned around and I was nearly blinded by a light that seemed to be emanating from her face. All I could see was a pair of beautiful cherry-red lips formed into a soft grin. The water reflected and amplified the light, rendering me completely unable to regain my bearings. "Who are you?" I asked again. I heard a playful giggle, like that of a girl who just got a compliment from her crush. With that, I suddenly woke up in my bed. The drone of the dialysis machine repeated in my ears again. That day, I overheard my mother discussing taking a compatibility test to see if she could give me one of her own kidneys. God bless my mother for that and so much more. I wondered if the appearance of the mysterious girl was my mind's way of celebrating the good news. Fast forward about a year later, February 5th, 2013. I remember that day like it was yesterday. At about 3 a.m., I woke up from a devastating nightmare in which my mother died during the surgery to give me her kidney. I woke up crying out for my mother like a baby. Pretty embarrassing for a 17-year-old. She came running in seconds later, wearing a hospital gown. We were in a room together because the surgery was going to take place a few hours later. I told her I didn't want her to go through with the surgery because I was afraid something bad was going to happen to her. She told me, "Don't worry, mijo. Everything will be all right. Go back to sleep." At 7 a.m., my mom and I were wheeled into surgery. My father, an Army veteran and general badass dude, stopped me briefly on my way out. It was the first time I ever saw him crying. He told me with tears in his eyes, "When you come out of that room, you'll be a new man." The doctor and the anesthesiologist prepped me for surgery. Before I knew it, I was on the table, slowly passing out from the drugs. As soon as my eyes closed, they opened up again. Of course, I was no longer in the hospital. I was laying on a grassy hill covered in flowers. This time, though, I was only able to enjoy the scene for a few seconds before I was plunged into a dark void. I floated in pure nothingness, when suddenly a beam of light ignited in the distance. I began moving toward the light as if it were pulling me in. I turned around to look behind me, and I saw an image that haunts me to this day. Another version of myself being pulled back into the black void. I watched as the other me disappeared into the distance. I was so confused and scared, I didn't know what to think. As I neared the beam of light, I woke up again. I was connected to a bunch of monitors. A mild sense of panic began to take hold of me as I thought about my mother. I guess the nurse could tell I was worried because she came in and let me know the surgery was a success and that my mom was fine and already in recovery. I was elated. 2014. I was 18 years old and in the hospital again, after another kidney issue that was fortunately resolved. I fell asleep in my room and awakened into a dream version of the same room. The red-haired girl was sitting in a chair near my bed. I tried looking at her face and, again, there was this intense light coming from it. Oddly, I could see most of her face well enough, but the light prevented me from seeing her eyes. It's kind of hard to explain. I'm not sure it even makes sense in terms of real-world physics. She was smiling and happy to see me. She stood up and began walking toward my bed. I managed to ask again, "Who are you?" She laughed playfully. By this time, she was only inches away from my face. The beams of light shone directly into my eyes. It was like staring into the sun. I asked her the only thing on my mind at the moment. "Will I ever see you in real life?" She laughed again. I lifted my arms to shield myself from the blazing light, but they did nothing to stop it. I heard her voice for the first time. In a soft, delicate tone, she told me,
"A dream isn't too far from reality."
Her voice carried a sensual weight with it in the air, flirtatious yet elegant and somehow reassuring. Her words left me with a warmth in my heart that stayed with me when I woke up, and I had a smile on my face. October 1st, 2016. I was 20 years old and on my way to the store with some friends to buy supplies for a cooking class. I was studying gastronomy at the time. One of my friends suggested we cross a particular street. Not thinking about it, I just stepped into the crosswalk without looking both ways. I was nonchalantly turning my head to the left when I noticed a car coming toward me, slamming on its brakes. Before I even had time to realize the mistake I'd made, the world went dark. I felt a sensation of weightlessness. It makes sense because my friends say I got thrown 15 feet into the air after being struck by the car. I did have time to wonder if that was the way I was going to die. I lamented that I still wanted to build a family of my own, that I wasn't ready to leave my mom and dad behind. I found myself begging God for more time. I regained consciousness when my body smacked into the ground. I felt myself rolling over and over again until I came to rest. My friend ran up to me. According to him, I simply asked what happened. He said I sounded drunk. I heard an older man's voice telling me to lie still. My leg was severely injured, maybe even broken. It turned out that the guy who ran me over was in the wrong and ended up having to pay me a settlement. After I was all healed up and rehabilitated, I was able to buy a new laptop along with some software and a small DJ controller. I haven't mentioned this to you before, but I had this crazy dream of becoming an electronic DJ. A friend of mine actually asked me to do a gig for a party he was planning, and I was super excited. I told my dad the good news, but much to my disappointment, he really shot me down. I get he probably was aware how hard it would have been for me to make a living that way, but still he was pretty harsh. That night, when I fell asleep, I awoke into a new scene. It was like a nightclub with music blaring. The speakers began playing soft, female voices that spoke words of encouragement.
Go ahead, dream breaker. It's your time to shine.
The next thing I knew, I was on stage feeling the rush of DJing in front of hundreds of people. I could feel the vibrations of the bass in my bones. I sensed a presence next to me, and I looked over to see the girl with the fiery red hair standing by my side. I played out an entire set. It was amazing, the feeling I craved and always daydreamed about. The girl gave me a big hug, which somehow felt even more amazing than the emotional rush I was already soaked in. Then, I woke up. You would think I would have been happy, still coming down from that extreme high, but instead, what I felt was a deep sadness, anger even. I kept asking myself, why? Why didn't I at least find a way to learn her name? I was so tired of seeing her for moments at a time in my dreams. I wanted desperately to stare into her eyes and talk to her in the real world. I was somehow convinced that she was somewhere out there, waiting for me. I started challenging her in my mind. If you're not there, then just stop. Leave me alone. I can't chase a fairy tale for the rest of my life. I want a real family, not visions of someone I can never touch. 2018. I was 22 and had just celebrated my birthday. I need to make clear that I don't drink or smoke or do any kind of drugs, because if I did, I would gladly credit this next experience to something I might have ingested. I went to bed after a small get-together with friends. As soon as I closed my eyes, I heard footsteps outside my bedroom door. I decided to check my phone to see what time it was, but I couldn't find it anywhere. For some reason, I began to sense danger. I grabbed a knife I keep under my pillow for just such occasions. I slowly sat up in my bed when I noticed a figure in my window, about a meter away from me. As I scanned the silhouette, I recognized her shape. It was the girl from my dreams, but she seemed different somehow. I stared at her through the glass. Even though everything else was blurry, I could see her clearly. For the first time, there was no blinding light coming from her eyes. The moon seemed to hide behind her head, giving her a halo of bluish-white light. Her hair was no longer that fiery red, but instead, it was an inky black that disappeared into the night behind her. She had the same soft grin on her face as she seemed to levitate outside the window. Her skin was the same pale white I saw when I first laid eyes on her. Her body, It was incredible. She wore a tight, short-sleeved shirt, latex pants, and a pair of black boots. I found the courage to ask her, firmly this time, "Who are you? Answer me." She just laughed. The light from the moon became unnaturally bright, making it hard to focus on her. The light overtook me, and the next thing I knew, it was morning. All I could think about was why the girl continued to bother me. The last encounter I had with this girl was yesterday, February 5th, 2018. I was going to sleep when I entered the dream state. This time, I was on the flat rooftop of my house. I felt a dark presence near me and looked up toward the sky. There she was, floating in the air. This time, she was very different. Twisted wings had sprouted from her back. She had small horns protruding from her forehead and a long, thin tail curling off her lower backside. Without a word, she swooped down in an attack posture, coming right for me. I somehow got out of the way in time. I noticed my vision going dark as if I was about to wake up, maybe a defense mechanism on the part of my subconscious. She dove at me again and I dodged, grabbing hold of her tail. I was able to pin the girl down against a barrel my mom uses for washing laundry, and she bore her teeth. They were razor sharp, with a long, pointed tongue slithering between them. The oddest thing was that despite her grotesque appearance, the strongest sensation I felt was her smell. It was one of the most alluring fragrances I've ever had the pleasure of sensing. It was like a combination of some beautiful flowers and chocolate. I looked her in the eyes for the first time. They were a bright, pinkish color, fierce, like the eyes of a wild feline. Not even the most perfect jewel could compare to them. Her skin was soft and as smooth as silk. Her body, even more curvaceous and supple. I realized as I was pinning her down with her backside against myself, I was becoming intensely aroused by her presence. So many conflicting emotions coursed through my body. Anger, happiness, sadness, guilt, lust was the most potent one of all. I felt myself losing control, like there was no telling what I would do next. Though I had her physically dominated, I was somehow still at her mercy, not the other way around. Finally, I said one last time, "Who are you? Tell me your name." With a tone dripping in seductive energy, she said,
"Take me and do as you please."
With every word that came out of her mouth, my body grew hotter. I demanded again, "Who are you?" She suddenly broke free from where I had her pinned, but I still had a grip on her tail. She turned around to face me and pulled me closer to her. She wrapped her arms around me, enveloping me in her scent, along with her voluptuous body. I realized that she was now much taller than I was. Crap, I thought to myself. What do I do? I could feel her body pressed against mine, every naked inch of it. Her skin felt amazing. I could hear her whispering in my ear with seductive tones. I found it nearly impossible to resist.
"I'll give you 5 minutes,"
she said. At that point, I was done. I couldn't fight back any longer. As she held on to me, all I could think was, am I really going to sell myself to this entity? Am I going to break my promise to God? At that thought, I somehow regained control and was able to once again ask her one final time, "Who are you?" Still, she didn't answer. Without thinking, I said, "If you're not going to tell me who you are, I swear I'm taking you back with me." As soon as the words left my mouth, an unknown, immensely powerful force began pulling me away from her. I tried holding on, but after only a couple of seconds, I was violently yanked out of the dream world, waking up in my bed. Everything around me was covered in sweat, as if I had just run a marathon. I was shocked and disappointed in myself. I wondered if I really was going to give up my soul for just 5 minutes of pleasure with a demon girl. I asked myself, what did she awaken inside me? At this very moment, Mr. X, I am afraid. I never felt such passionate emotion in my life, and I'm not sure what I'll do, if I'll be able to resist, if I ever see this girl again. If anyone has a similar experience, please let me know. Also, I want to send my thanks to Venus for giving me the courage and motivation to share my story with you. Please send her my regards. Sincerely, Peter. Alright, greetings friends, Mr. X Dreams here. Very interesting story. I'm going to talk about my thoughts real quick, and then I'm going to get into the live dreamer chat and see what everyone else had to say about this intense series of encounters. So, some of my thoughts on this story. I found it really interesting that, especially starting from the first dream, everything in that environment seemed to be tailored for Peter's exact situation. And I'm wondering, what I mean by that is this. He happened to be in a point in his life where he could not participate in sports and be active and run around and everything like that like he used to enjoy. And these elements of his dream were turning everything that was currently sucky about his life, turned it all upside down. He's able to see great, he's running around in the woods, and he's experiencing this connection to the world the way he always really wanted to. And not to mention when he gets to this impossibly beautiful lake and he finds this impossibly attractive girl in the middle of it, surrounded by a crescent of trees that it's almost like it was all set up for him to get there and make this discovery that this girl was waiting for him in the middle of this lake. Very interesting, and it makes me wonder, because we like to sort of think about the mundane explanation along with the supernatural explanation for these types of stories. So was it his deep desires that he wanted? He wants to have a family, he wants to have a girlfriend, and he wants to be able to run and jump and see far and all this kind of stuff. So is it his own subconscious constructing this, or is it his him being visited by an external entity? It's a question I'll leave up to you. You let me know what you think by the end of this video. We're going to discuss this quite a bit more though. Yeah, so if you think about it as being an external entity, it's kind of messed up that such a creature is taking advantage of someone who's in this lonely, vulnerable situation. So in the second dream, in a weird way, it kind of goes toward the mundane explanation where he's being split into two different people, and one version of him is being cast off into the darkness while the other is going toward this light. And that's the night after his dad told him, hey, you're going to be a new man after this surgery. And I wonder if it's that. But as I was thinking about that, I remembered that this bright light beam comes from the face of this possible succubus entity. So it's like, do we go with his subconscious creating this heavenly afterlife image of him going toward a light and leaving an old him behind? Or is he being sort of tricked into drawing closer to the succubus? And I really don't know the extent that succubi are known to be able to manipulate people into falling in love with them, but this seems like this could have been what was happening if you suspend your disbelief for a moment. So then we go to the encounter that Peter had at his bedroom window, where it almost seems like he might have really been awake, because so the original email, like I said, was written in pretty broken English. He's, I believe, a native Spanish speaker, and English was his second language. Did a great job explaining and communicating all this, but there were a few things I had to sort of piece together, and what it seemed like was that unlike all the other instances where he's dreaming, in the dreams he's able to see clearly, which he cannot in real life because of his eye problems. But when he saw this creature in his window, this woman in the window, she was crystal clear, according to his account. Everything else was blurry. that's the thing that made me wonder if that part was really a dream, because, or maybe was it a hallucination of some sort, a totally cerebral thing. Again, you be the judge. I mean, it's not like this. And another thing I gotta say, this happened 3 years ago, and I feel really bad because I didn't see the email at the time. There was a lot going on back then for me in my personal life, and that was one of the emails that kind of just slipped by, and he was really trying to get this story out there. So, Peter, I apologize for taking so long to talk about this, and I hope you're good. I sent him a message to check on him. I haven't heard back from him. I hope everything's fine with him to this day, but I don't even know where I was going with that. Anyway, the climactic part of the story is what I'm sure most of you would want to talk about. To me, it was wild. It was even wilder in the original email than, I included all the elements, but the way that he explained how he was feeling and, the detail in which he was experiencing that final confrontation when the true form, so to speak, of this succubus was revealed, this voluptuous, super sensual, and seductive creature who has all these weird, grotesque physical attributes like wings and horns and a tail and a long tongue, sharp teeth, but still he found this intense attraction for. I tried my best to paint that picture without getting super graphic, but those of us who have some experience exploring the mental gutter, so to speak, should be able to fill in the gaps there, I'm sure. So, yeah, if I had to pull one moral out of this story, it would be careful crossing the street. Always look both ways. That's something that anyone can take out of this story for sure. Because Peter got hit by a car, and believe me, I've seen that happen, and I actually got some serious post-traumatic stress as a result of it. It took me years to kind of stop hallucinating seeing other people getting hit by cars. It's not fun to see, and I'm sure it's even less fun for it to happen. So make sure you always look both ways. Less fun for it to happen to you directly. So anyway, I want to know what your thoughts were surrounding this fascinating story. Enough rambling. Have you ever seen the same person in multiple different dreams? Do you really think that Peter was visited by an entity, or do you think that it was his subconscious communicating certain things to him? What do you suppose may have happened if he had given in to the temptation of the succubus? And lastly, do you think that you would be able to resist such an encounter with something or someone that you found extremely, impossibly attractive? So now, I'm going to open up the floor for the dreamers listening live to weigh in. Remember, if you want a chance at your question or comment showing up in a future video, turn on notifications so you can catch the live reading and discussion. Okay, so, sponsor of the show, Shinfitz, says, I wonder if this person is a lucid dreamer or not. That's a good question. I mean, I would assume, well, there was nothing in the story particularly that made me think that Peter is a lucid dreamer. It's kind of like, it's kind of something that I would assume would have greatly aided him in that type of situation, in the various situations that he found himself in during this series of encounters. I don't think he was really in control at the time, if I had to guess. Warrior Princess Dragon says, entities go after people with vulnerable feelings or depression. And yes, I would definitely, if there are such a thing as entities that can meddle in the affairs and the mental capacities of human beings, I would assume that there would be targets of opportunity that are a little bit more vulnerable than others. And yeah, that it would totally make sense that someone who is suffering in some way, emotionally or mentally, if there is a way for a creature or an entity to manipulate a person's dreams and show them the things that would solve their problems that they have in the real world, or things that will just make them emotionally more attached to or dependent on these entities, they would do it. I mean, why not? There are human beings that would do that if they could. Living ones, normal, mundane people like you and I. Yeah, so I would definitely see that as a possibility. Ambar says, we are faced with temptation every day. Very true. I can say I've lacked in discipline a number of times, even briefly picking up vices I didn't previously have. And that's part of the human condition. We are all, when we encounter the right set of circumstances, there's pretty much a way for any person to be tempted. And you just got to do your best every day with all these crazy scenarios we find ourselves in. But with that, I think we're going to bring this story, it's getting pretty long already, bring this to a close. Hope you all enjoyed this story, and I'll see you for the next one. If you're listening all the way to this point, the code word that we decided on as a group for this story is pink eye. You can use your imagination and figure out why exactly that is, but if you're listening to this part at the very end of the video, type pink eye into your comment down below. Be creative with it so that I can see you. Alright, my friends, later. This episode was sponsored by dreamers like you. Samantha, Cindy S., Lorie Long, Ina Cook, Leann, Ellie, Ambar, Zen 2011, Shinfitz, Terico, Reuk, LittleOwl, Dolly, Priscilla, Sylvia, AestheticWaif. Thank you all so much. All right. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, don't forget to like and share. If you made it to the very end, you're exactly the kind of subscriber I'm looking for. Don't forget to turn on those notifications. That way, you can catch the live show and discuss the stories with me. Your input might even appear in my next video. Last thing, if you heard a code word after the story, type it in a comment down below so I know who the real dreamers are. Take care, my friend. Until next time.